Good afternoon to my dear brothers and sisters in Christ. Welcome to the Care for Mental Health and Youth panel. Woohoo, we're all young at heart. So allow me to introduce a little bit more about this panel this afternoon. I'm Audrey. I'm an entrepreneur and educator. I'm also from the Catholic Business Network. Our mission is to inspire faith at work. And with me today, I have a very wonderful guest here. We have Denise from Clarity. We have Daniel from Catholic Family Life, Kitson from IJHCC, Celynn from Boys Town, and Damon from Canossaville. And so with my panelists today, this panel would really want to go more deeply to understand from the eyes of faith what God is saying and what His people are doing in the care for mental health and youth space. And at the end of the day, what we hope to do is to be able to cultivate hope and to hear from our speakers how we can begin to enable a sense of flourishing for the next generation amidst a very challenging topic like mental health. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is to ask the speakers to introduce themselves, who they are, their organization, their mission, and if you could do us the honor, Denise, to kickstart.
Hi, my name is Denise. I'm one of the clinical psychologists at Clarity. Clarity is a Catholic mental health, is a Catholic organization that provides mental health services for people with mental health needs. We serve people from the ages of 18 to about 65, but the bulk of our clients are actually in the young adults, sort of range between 18 to 35, that forms more than 3/4 of the people that we see actually.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Daniel. I'm the principal therapist of Catholic Family Life. Catholic Family Life is an organization that supports families across the lifespan, and the wing that I'm coming from is actually from the counseling side, but my organization also provides psychoeducation, family life programs, all across the lifespan.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Kitson and I'm from the IJ Homes and Children's Center. I'm a guy in the girls' home. I believe most of you have heard about IJ, which is Infant Jesus, and we just celebrated our 170th anniversary. We started out in Chimes. How many IJ girls are here? Amen.
So please volunteer at the IJ Homes. Okay. Now what we do, really, I believe most of us understand our history. When the sisters came 170 years ago to celebrate education in Singapore, and people actually abandoned their babies because they have faith and hope that our sisters will take good care of them. Our mission continues to today. A lot of children may not be physically abandoned, but as parents sometimes we do neglect them, and sometimes we do abandon our children emotionally. So at IJ Homes, we run the student care centers, we do student outreach. Why? Because we want them to grow up to be as successful as all of you here in this room, and to be that image of God. If you ask me why I joined the IJ Homes, 2 reasons. These 2 words came to my mind: abandon and hope. Even myself, I do face these 2 words as a dilemma every day, because we will feel abandoned at one point in time, and we do give up things, but there's always hope. So the IJ, we continue with our IJ mission with that hope for our children. That's what we do. So please join us.
Thank you, Kitson. In fact, IJ just celebrated our 170th anniversary. So it's a long legacy of this mission with the IJ sisters. Celynn.
Hi, very good afternoon to everyone. I hope all of you had a good lunch. My name is Celynn and I'm from Boys Town. Boys Town is a social service agency that offers 6 services. Out of these 6 services, 2 services are focused on children in the child protection system. The remaining 4 services are focused on children, youth and families in the community, and I'm from one of these 4 services, which is Clinical Intervention Center, in short CIC. This is where I'm from. So CIC does outreach, engagement, and education on mental health, as well as training and consultation for school. At the intensive end of the spectrum, we provide counseling and therapeutic intervention.
Hi everyone, I'm Damon from Canossaville Children and Community Services. I wanted to, so by lining that up, I'm the last person, so I also wanted to ask any Canossian girls around. I have a few Canossian, and I've got Sister Jo as well, definitely a Canossian girl. And so I'm the Executive Director of Canossaville. Been in this sector for the past 12 years, going through public sector, non-profit, and then now social service sector. But unlike some of us within this group, they have been clinicians their whole life. I've been trained for economics and human resource. What my place in this, right? And so as a management person, I also said right off management school, I told my friends and even professors that I won't be counting other people's money. I'll be counting money so that I can help people. And so as I entered into social service, then it became a passion of helping others. So while assuming the role as executive director, I felt like I was more a storyteller. I was an advocate for or a voice for the voiceless, right? So for thanks, I've also had this slide made for the team. You can go ahead to take photos of these slides. It has all the information you need about us, but I really want to zoom into this big why, right? A lot of us are doing the good work here, but a lot of times we have to drill down to this whole reason of why we're doing what we're doing, right? In Canossaville, we believe in nurturing each child in his or her own ways, right? That individuality, that uniqueness, there's no cohort level kind of plans for them. We have to always think of each child as unique and doing the best for each of the child. So we just happen to then be taking care of these children from 6 years and below, 7 to 12. And everything that we create is really all anchored and centered around giving them a safe, conducive, and inclusive environment to grow and learn in. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Damon. I mean, just listening to all our speakers today, you can imagine the range and the diversity of their mission. And I come here with so I had the opportunity to speak to them as well. And as I listened to them, I was very inspired because I think this mental health topic is something that's very, very challenging. So we will delve a bit deeper today with the speakers. So we actually have an interactive poll and word cloud. Just invite you to scan your phones with this QR code. There's actually 3 questions that will emerge. The first is, throw the words that our youth are experiencing right now in relation to this mental health challenge. The second question is, what are sources of stress? So don't worry about question number 3 for now. If you can just put NA for the time being, that's for later. So we just invite you to have a moment of reflection. What are some of the things our young people are experiencing around mental health and well-being right now? What are their sources of stress? What are you hearing from the ground? What are some of your peers saying to you? And once you're done with question 1 and 2, don't worry about question 3. Just put NA and click submit. Can you just give me a thumbs up if you submitted? Okay, thank you. Our trusty friend Glendon here is working it for us. Maybe while we wait for that, in the meantime, for those of you who've given me a thumbs up, what are some of the things that you have said? Could you shout it out? What are some of the sources of stress? What our young people are experiencing? Social media, thank you. Absolutely. Any other sources of stress? Okay, perfect. Thank you, Glendon. Anxiety, social pressure. emotional stress, lack of support, depression, meaningless anxiety, aimlessness and lack. Self-image. Yeah, very real pressures. Stress in education, this is a big one for many young people, and I believe their parents are equally stressed too. Loneliness, yes, a lack of sense of community, sense of anxiety. Self-esteem, that's a big one, right? Okay, we can go to the second one. Let's have a look. What are the sources of stress? School. No surprise. Family. Peer stress. Environmental pressures. Yes, climate crisis, climate stress is another. Schoolwork. Yeah, so peer perception, thank you for that. That's a really insightful one. Parental expectation. So this is the backdrop in which we are entering this discussion today. And as we hold all of these in our hands and in our hearts, what I'd like to do is kickstart our conversation with clarity and with Catholic family life. Given this backdrop that you see, Denise, what are some of the key insights that you are sensing on the ground when tackling mental health and youth for our Catholic population and Singaporeans here?
So I think, when I looked at the word cloud for question 1, in my mind, it really tallies with a lot of what we see on the ground, right? So if I look at the word cloud for question 1 just now, it was, to me, fell into 2 big groups. One, about personal identity, right? Self-esteem, who am I as a person? And then the other one about relationships, right? If you think about loneliness, about social media use, about friendships. So I think that tallies a lot with what we do see. Because if you think about the young people, right, especially in the Singapore context, right, from the ages of at least 7 up till they graduate from tertiary education or some sort of pre-U course, essentially their life is planned out for them. By this age, you do this. By this age, you do this. By this age, you achieve this, right? And suddenly, when they reach the late adolescence, young adults, suddenly we tell them that, hey, you're young adults now. You all now need to, be independent people, make your own decisions, make good decisions. And I think a lot when we do see these young people, when we see them in that time of growth and transition, right? About suddenly being asked to do adult things, but never really having that much opportunity to develop that skill, right? So a lot of our young people come to us with a lot of uncertainty, with a lot of doubts as to whether they can, I guess the words that they use, whether they can adult properly, right? And that comes out a lot in, I guess, a lot of what you do see, right? Self-esteem. Am I good enough to be a functioning member of the society? Am I good enough as a friend, right? Am I good enough for my friends to want to hang out with me, right? I see all my friends progressing somewhere, where am I in all of this? So actually, it sounds like you guys have a good sense of what's going on. And to some extent, it makes sense given the developmental stage that they're in. That's what adolescence and young adulthood is all about, right? Just finding who we are and how we can just be our own people, right? Finding this nice balance between being independent and connected at the same time. So yeah, so I think that's a lot of what we do see in the work that we do. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and I echo a lot of what Denise said. I think with the youth nowadays, one of the things that doesn't change is the desire for meaningful connection, for social connection, to feel like I'm somebody, I'm connected to someone, and we vibe together, The only thing is that nowadays there are so much more options of how to connect. And many of them are virtual. Many of them weren't available during our time. My time, okay? Yeah. And where meeting someone was physically meeting up with someone. Nowadays, it's all through social media. And what happens is that I find some of the youth are very connected digitally. They know how to maintain their profile, they know how to upload regularly. But when you go into a real world, like what Denise is saying, when you go into adulting and you need to go for a job interview and all that, your virtual platform, yes, it provides some account of yourself, but when you meet up with the interviewer face to face, how do you project yourself? How are you real? That you can't hide behind a social media profile anymore. And I think the youth, the other part that I find that they feel quite challenged is the onslaught of diverse and confusing messages from various channels that were not previously available. Social media, alternative news websites, AI nowadays, and trying to decipher what is real, what is not, what is the whole narrative of whether I'm good enough receives a lot more attack, and they become more vulnerable to feelings of rejection, feelings of low self-esteem. But underlying that is also the desire, and I think our youth, we need to recognize them, that they desire to do what is right. But the question is, what is right? It's a lot harder nowadays to figure out what is right, because in this age of relativism, everyone is right. Your right is your right, and my right is also right. So I think that's one of the challenges. I mean, the other challenge I see a lot.
Thank you for that, Daniel and Denise. And it's very heartening also to hear this, right? Because oftentimes our young people is known to be strawberry generation, but hey, there's an inherent goodness in each and every one of them. And I think you mentioned something very powerful about developing their sense of identity. So whether we are youth who are ordinary youth or youth at risk, a marginalized youth, we're all trying to develop a sense of being right and being good. And just wanted to dig a bit deeper to touch on our children, youth, and communities at risk. What are some of the key areas on your heart that you have been tackling in this season? Perhaps, I see that Damon has a mic. Yeah, go for it, Damon.
Thank you, Audrey. Close to heart at Canossaville. So for Canossaville, we do take care of children from 0 to 12. So you'll be thinking youth is a definition goes, if you go nationally, it goes up to 35 and all that. And these are different groups of people that we do have in the panel that takes care of. So if I cut it off at 12 years old, and among here, I can see some organizations that, hey, you do take care of that 7 to 12 being your prime group of children as well. Then we all share the same problem, right? These children are trying to grow up and be adults. And everything you try to tell them seems to be a bit difficult to process for them. And they're all trying to be young boys or big boys and girls that they are in, right? The therapists are nodding their heads too. But I think that one big thing that all of us are trying to fight or work against here is this sense of belonging. Where do they really be? And of course then, this sense of belonging, if they don't get it from the home, they'll find it somewhere else. And those are very readily accessible. Rewind the time back 20 years, where we won't be using devices and phones. Where do you look for somebody? You go downstairs. You walk around your neighborhoods and you see somebody, you'll make friends. Now, for a child, all they need is to turn on the Wi-Fi, log on to the phones, and they're connecting to somebody already. But is that danger to them? There's also dangers. Are they discerning from the dangers and the right and the wrong? How can we help someone in the age of 7 to 12 to discern their path to say, this is right and this is wrong? So I think that's one of those things that Island Lines, that sense of belonging.
Thanks, Damon. Go for it, Celynn.
I think some of the key areas that we are focusing on would be children and parents. I think, as you all know out there, I think there are really a big range of programs and services targeted at youth. So we realized that, there is a bridge in, a parental gap there, whereby parents are not very fully equipped to observe or identify signs of distress in their children. And we are also focusing on the children as well, because there are already a lot of services and programs for youth, but we came to realize that the children, that there is a gap in services for children. So we believe in early intervention, and because children are more malleable, so the younger where we start intervention with them, I think the better to mitigate stigma related to help seeking for mental health issues. Yeah, so another thing that I've mentioned earlier, focusing on is to provide parenting intervention to support parents to support their children and youth or their teenage children in their mental health journey. Because when they come to us to see us for therapeutic support, we only see them at most once a week. However, their parents spend a huge amount of time with them. So therefore, we want to also focus on parenting intervention as well as providing early intervention for children.
For the IJ homes, we basically focus on girls and boys between the ages of 7 to 12. And we do a lot of preventive. And I think the questions, some of the things I heard, I copied down because a bit old already, is whether I'm good enough, what is right, sense of belonging. And actually, as I reflected on this, just 2 weeks ago, during the lunch time, one of my girls was crying. And I asked her why was she crying and she's not having her lunch. It's because she didn't do well for her WA, weighted assessment 1. And I asked her, well, if you didn't do well, it's WA1. Sorry, my time WA1, you feel like it's okay, but now a bit different. Yeah. So I said, WA1 percentage is lower, right? You should do better for mid-year. It's okay, right? Her answer was, it's not okay. Because my mommy says that if I don't do well for WA1, she's not going to bring me for the June holidays. And I cannot play with my cousins. And if I don't do well for my mid-year, I have to start working. And guess how old is she? 9. So I told her, I think you're too young to work, number 1, but you can volunteer with me, yeah. No, but sometimes I feel that, even as parents, unknowingly, we do add stress. And if you ask me if the stress were the same as last time, I can tell you it's the same. When I was studying, my parents added stress as well. Because if you don't do well, okay, maybe in the olden days, the king comes out, right? Today, you can't do that, right? But times have changed. And I think one of the greatest fault I realized is even myself as a parent, sometimes we tend to tell our kids, we are stronger last time, we are more resilient last time. And sometimes when I think through it, I say it's bullshit because last time things were different, now things are different. And I think like what I've seen, earlier on as I mentioned about pressures, there's pressures everywhere, from school, from parents, social media, everywhere. And even as adults, we feel stress. Being the ED of IJ as well, if I don't have enough money to run my charity, I also feel stress. Our board members also feel stress. How many of us at work don't feel stress? But it's very common that we tend to share the stress to people who cannot manage the stress. And we pass this to our children. That's what I realized. In that short span of time when dealing with the kids, even we have kids whose parents may be relocating, and they felt they're too young to share with them. And the girl cried. Because if my parents would go overseas to work, if I were to stay, I don't get to see my parents. If I were to go with them, I'll lose my friends. And as parents, we don't talk to them because they're too young to understand. You ask me whose fault? I really can't tell.
Actually, on that note, Kitson, and this is open to any panelists who like to answer, right? Because I think your story is very poignant. It's only when sometimes our children are in that state of helplessness and tears that we really sit and we say, what's going on? And we don't want to wait till it's at that point where it's like too late. And so when we think about the voices of our youth and our young people, how will our youth like us to see them? Kitson, would you like to, since you brought up that very beautiful story?
Okay, how they like, okay, so I like to talk with the girls there. I mean, most of my colleagues will know, right? And sometimes, simple things I ask them, and simple answers they tell me. You know, I played Counter-Strike, and at which level? I played Roadrunner, and at which level? Which is about digital devices. And these are things that they feel proud of. But to me, I felt that sometimes these are faces that they hide behind. Because, I mean, even as parents, I remember just last year, December, one of the girls did an artifact she wanted to bring home to share with her father. And the next day she came back crying because her father had no time to listen to what she has to say. Because we tend to abandon them emotionally, or sometimes even physically, because we're all busy at work. It's a trade-off. Just like how I started, sharing about abandonment and hope. So I feel that sometimes the cry of our youth is really, I need the attention. I just need to know that I'm okay. I just need to know that you can spend some time with me. I mean, personally, I had the experience when my boy was in primary school last time. I was working with International SOS, and my time was almost 24 hours by 7. And my boy was going through primary school. And sometimes I have meetings at 3 a.m. And, I remember my wife telling me that, you go back, you can sleep. And literally you sleep like a pig. You snore, right? Because tired. But she said she could not sleep anymore. And it affected family life. And that was a call that I have to think, should I abandon the job and give hope to my family? Or should I do like other things? I mean, it's always that dilemma. And I felt that really, even my boy at that point in time was hope. I used to travel. So my boy was also asking when will daddy come home? I think that changed. And I made that commitment to focus more on my boy, thanks to Catholic family. Yeah. So I think, it's really that conscious effort, because our youth are crying, but the problem is, do we listen to them? Or we tell them that we are much stronger than them last time, and we are better. I think that's always what parents will say, right? Because we think that we want to give them that hope. We tell them, last time no problem, why now you like that, right? And we tend to compare last time. But sadly, today is different. Yeah.
If I were to, add on what Kitson was saying, I think one of the things that he said just now really resonated with me, because in preparing for this, actually I was a bit stressed, right? So I went to poll the rest of the team of therapists back at Clarity. Hey, wait, what do your clients want to be seen or heard for, huh? And then, so I think we were talking about it, and I think something that you said came up even because we serve a little bit of an older segment of the youth, right? But actually it comes out in a different form, but similar themes, right? You're talking about how they hide behind computer games, hide behind, some of these achievements or seeming achievements. And I think that comes up a lot in the young adults as well, because, just now we were talking a little bit about this very poignant theme of, am I good enough, right? And in young people, the younger folks hide behind computer games and things like that. The older folks hide behind achievements and facades, right? They go to work, they work really, 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 really hard to put up this facade of, I'm such a good worker, I'm responsible. But then they come to therapy and then, they're seemingly doing really, really well, but they come to therapy and they're very upset because I go to work, I do all this, this facade is getting harder and harder and harder to keep up. And it's starting to mean nothing, right? So I guess in answering that question, right, what do young people want us to see or hear them for? I think I like the idea of attention, right? But I think something for us as the older folks to think about, and maybe you're not as old, maybe I'm old, but something for us to think about, right, would be, what do we give them the attention for, right? If we only give them the attention for the things that they are done well, then of course that is what they're going to show you. But how will that help that sense of, am I good enough, right? So when I spoke to my team, one of the things that we're talking about is that, it's really about paying attention to who they are. Achievements, flaws, failures, shortcomings, hobbies, even if they're different from yours, right? So that, I guess, what I would really, really love our young people to learn is that they may not be perfect, and they are good enough just the way they are, right? So I guess as a society, as a community, how can we help our youth to learn that lah? That's what my team talked about back in our office. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you, Kitson and Denise. The point that I'm going to make, and I'm going to say it out as a question to all of you is, do you agree with me when we say youth and children all wants to be decision makers? To dilute that question a little bit more, or even unpack it a little bit more, I think for all of us as responsible adults, we always say, we can't let them make all the decisions, right? But what if we say that it's not about them making the decisions, but them contributing to the decision making? That's a different alternative mindset to get that. So then children themselves are the one asking, and they come in the form of questions. So you can have the child asking, Daddy, where are we going today? Do you think that was a question, or is he or she trying to hint you about where they want to go? Right? And if they come to you for attention through many things, could be also you see them going to the general office a little bit more because they talk back to the teachers, or they've done certain things to angle their classmates, or of course result to physical confrontations with classmates. And all these are that cries of attention. And technically speaking, they want to be heard in different ways. But children being children, they do not know and have all the... It's not like us, we will say, can I book a calendar invite for me to speak my principal? You won't, right? Your children won't do that, right? You probably will, right? As your staff, and say, boss, I would like to talk to you, and I'll make an appointment to see you at 4 o'clock later. And I'll voice out everything I have. Children won't. They will show it in their actions and words and little demeanors every day. And so then the decision-making elements that we taught here was, we want to have them have a fair share of that decision-making. It's part of the contributor to the process, but we also then want to test that waters, right? So I have my staff here, what they will do, and I see them doing that is, they will ask them questions, and then you help them get better at making those decisions. Like, are we going to do this first or do that? And they will butter a trade with you for sure, right? No playtime at 4 o'clock if you don't do this, right? But then they'll start buttering with you. What if I do this? What if I do that? Sure. Then they are also then learning a life skill, am I right? Because then in the future, when they go out, they start buttering about the real work of life. Yeah. So decision makers, as little ones are still decision makers, but I think that we need to be the sensible adult in the room to guide them through those decision making processes. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Damon. Daniel, would you like to add?
Just wanted to add a point, because as Denise was sharing, I just reflected, and what came to me was, you can't pour out of an empty cup. And many times when I have youth who are stressed, and I look at the parents, they are equally or even more stressed. And if you talk about them not being decision makers, or not being, the youth not being part of the decision-making process, or the youth feeling stressed or not good enough, very often when I see the parents tell me, I don't know what to do. I failed as a parent. I don't know what else to do with my child, and I'm stressed. And I think many times when I see stressed youth, I look to the parents to see whether they need a help as well, whether they need some sorting out of their own and unpacking of whether they feel good enough about themselves. It's very hard if you've just had a horrid day, your boss told you, hey, you didn't do this well enough, your appraisal, your bonus is going to get affected. You come home and your kid is feeling lousy, had a lousy day. You may be too absorbed with how lousy you feel to be able to give to your child. So I think it's also insight into recognizing that for us as parents as well.
Yeah, the role of parents, and really figuring out also how parents can be empowered to navigate some of these very challenging moments. I have a miracle baby. She's 16 months. And when Damon talks about decision making, honestly, I'm amazed at how much this child can understand. I'm like, she's 16 months. And we talk about decision. I mean, of course, you know, her cognitive development is limited at that age, but it reflects to me how when we give our children attention, like what you said, Denise, you know, like it's really, sometimes it's just being with her, like watching her play. There's no agenda and there's nothing on the table, right? And I think having a sense of being, just being with our children makes a difference. I'd like to also mention, actually, Brother Collin was meant to be at this panel. He had some interesting stories and impactful stories to share. He unfortunately has COVID, so that's why he's not here with us. But his work has been very impactful for boys who do not have a place to go, do not have homes. So if we go a little bit deeper, you know, for the participants here to understand what is your disposition as you work on the ground, because this work is hard, you know, and it's very challenging sometimes when it can feel so overwhelming. This one is actually for Damon. It says, sometimes the social mission and degree of pain can be so overwhelming. What can the participants here learn from how you understand the challenges and how you deal with the solutions at present? Any stories you can share with us?
Again, it's I hope that we can even have in the future, not just a conference, but also have all this contribution from the rest of you, because I'm pretty sure on the day-to-day, it is really not just tiring, but sometimes the word that I even heard of, staff coming to me, telling me is infuriating, right? Of course, I have a story to share about what I think at times it's what I call multi-layered issues. And we were talking about how family is involved here. It was my first day of work back in Canossaville, and I had a really good morning, meetings and introductions and everything. And scheduled day is supposed to end at 6, the normal 9 to 6, right? So then at 5:45 mark, I have someone rushing into my office, and she's here as well. She's like, Damon, we're dealing with this crisis right now. I don't have much more information, but this is under control. And I'll say, okay, there goes the 6 o'clock knockoff. And I realized and say, hey, no, I'm not going to be here for 9 to 6 anyway. I will be fully immersed till the issue or the crisis at hand is dealt with. And I was telling myself, yeah, and through the interviews, through all these things, I was asking myself, yeah, I knew that I was not going to be endorsing myself into a work that is going to be conformed to 9 to 6 or 8 to 5. It's going to be, at that moment in time, if you had to deal with it, you got to deal with it. Right? But I realized then what we're good at as a community is tap on each other's strengths and work with each other. Because then at the same moment of that crisis moment, I had 4 staff worked on together, had a quick corridor chat. This is what I'm going to do, this, that. And then we went on. And out of that 4, I'm not even in that. I was standing quite far away looking at that conversation happen. And I asked myself, now then, that trust of your team is important, because then you are building that trust with your team to then work together to solve the issues that we have. You cannot peel one, you may be able to peel one layer, but each of us peel one layer on this onion, on this wonderful onion that's called the little kid in front of us, and then we see the layers being solved. And one of these key layers, of course, the stresses that I do think that we feel here as staff of this is we often get parentized by our parents. We become pseudo-parents of our children. So that's why sometimes I joke over my staff and say that you have 100 children under your hands when you only don't even have your first child with you, you know. But then you have the whole class or even whole cohort of children in your hands. And we've more often than not becomes more interested in parenting the child than the parents themselves, right? And that becomes additional stress on all of us, right? So that makes us feel, hey, you know, I think sometimes we should work together and include the parents as one of the partners into solving the same problems that you're all interested in. And so,
Include the parents and include God in the process too. Because I remember, actually, just to share, my father actually had depression, and it was quite challenging. And it was very funny. We actually balloted for CR, thinking that, CR would be for them. But in the end, they didn't get CR. Then I was very anxious. Then I spoke to this lady who was at CR. And then, what? The lady said, "Don't worry, God can take better care of your father than you can." And that was really, a warning. I mean, a warning and also a sense of encouragement, right? Because to your point, sometimes we are like spiritual parents. And in many cases, many of our panelists here are. They will be the spiritual parents of the children who probably never had parents, but reminded that, God is the best parent for us. And we are constantly being parented by God, even at our age.
Yeah, I think when Damon was sharing, I quickly pulled up my Holy Week reflections. And I started to think that actually this is what really kept me going and why I joined the IJ Homes on the mission. And when I look back in my Holy Week reflections, I think when you talk about God as well, it flagged out to me that Jesus was being plotted against. He was misjudged. People do not believe him. He was deserted by Peter, James, and John. He was distressed. He was betrayed. He was disowned. He's criminalized. He's accused. He's condemned. He's stripped. He's traded. But because of his love for us, and I think that resonated a lot when you said about God and, when Damon mentioned as well, on what really kept us going. The fact is that he cared for us. He cared for me. He died for me when I am still a sinner. And really, that's what kept me going. And in fact, one of the girls just last week asked me this question: "Can I call you Daddy?" I nearly cried. Because it's really an emotional abandonment. And the parents are not poor. And this is not the marginalized. This is not a family who... In fact, this is a family to a full paying fee. So this is perhaps the new poor that we have in our environment today. This is perhaps, sometimes we talk about, we want to work with the poor, the low income. But trust me, our children and youth, there's no such thing as poor or low income. Everyone is vulnerable. Everyone deserves that same level of dignity of care. That's how I feel. Christ didn't come just because we cannot afford. He came because he knew that we needed him. He knew that, we deserve his love, whether we are rich or poor.
Yeah, thanks, Kitson. Just in brief, I think the depression, mental health struggle is so real. When I was journeying with my father as well, I remember asking Jesus, I said, what's going on? And it was very strange. My mom and dad, and my dad now actually goes to IMH and share his story as someone who's recovered. So, I don't think he minds me sharing this, but he was asked to pray the rosary by a group of friends, and he pulled out a particular meditation as part of one particular rosary bead. It was the crown of thorns. And as my dad meditated, prayed through his crisis, it was what you said, Kitson, that our Lord was condemned, he suffered, and sometimes this illness is a form of suffering. And actually, at this point, I would like to ask Celynn to share a little bit about her work, because when I first heard and read about her work, this trauma-informed care in your approach in dealing with mental health for our young people, what are some of these actions, possible actions that you have taken to embody the values of trauma-informed care?
Okay, I think some of the panelists here, as well as Damon, I think they have actually demonstrated some of these values. So when Damon spoke about going through decision making with his staff. So that is one values or principle, I call it collaboration, whereby we share the power, because inadvertently, as practitioners or professionals working with children, youth and their families, even with parents, they always see us in a position of power. So in order to reduce that power imbalance, we need to share that power and decision making. We need to empower them and respect the choices that they make. So I've been hearing things like letting them be decision makers. So this is what it really is all about. We ask them, we give choices to them. So for children, are they capable of making choices? I would say yes, they are capable if you give them reasonable choices. So in this aspect, what we are doing is we're empowering them, giving them choices, collaborating with them. In the process of doing it, then we will build trustworthiness and we will build safety. We will build emotional safety within themselves. Yeah. So I just want to find out, anyone here do not know what trauma-informed care is? All right, so most of you will know. So maybe just to share a little. So research findings from the Singapore Mental Health Study on the prevalence of adverse childhood experiences and its association with mental illnesses has actually very great implication on the way we deliver our services to children, youth, and their families, right? So findings from this adverse childhood experiences study also tells us that adverse childhood experiences is common locally and not just in other populations in Western country, because the very first adverse childhood experiences study was done in the US. Yeah, so the findings also tells us that trauma can have a very great impact on one's mental health. Therefore, it is really important to understand what trauma is and what are some of the things that we can do to lower, the effects of trauma in people. So being trauma informed reflects that awareness and understanding. It requires a mindset shift from what is wrong with you to what is happening to you. It adopts an attitude of respect, compassion, giving care and attention. I think this is also some of the themes that has emerged from today's sharing earlier in the morning. Yeah, so it is important to also understand that positive experiences in our relationships can help us to heal, whereas negative experiences in our relationships can actually make our emotional and psychological problems worse. So we should not underestimate, the soothing and validating capacity of positive interactions, even in routine interactions. We may not know for sure whether the children and youth that we come across have trauma histories, but if we adopt the mentality that every child and youth that we come across has experiences that may be potentially traumatic, then we will then pay great attention in the way that we conduct ourselves with them, in the way that we interact with them. So therefore, I think providing support that is trauma-informed is really crucial to the process of recovery.
Thank you for that, Celynn. Yeah, it's almost like, as we were preparing for this, all of us probably carry some form of trauma, right? Whether we are aware or unaware. And from this morning's panel discussions and sharing, seeing as God sees, and it's almost like God sees the trauma and the pain that we and our young people are carrying. And if God sees, then maybe we can learn to see how God sees. And I wonder for the panelists here, because, God is constantly writing that story of our life with us. And especially for many of us here who are parents, youth, and maybe even parents to be, what can we do to address issues of this sense of trauma, abandonment, stress, to help our youth to flourish in a way that God has intended them to be? Any panelists?
Maybe I'll just have a goal. Yeah, so I think two of the risk factors that contribute to children and youth mental health would be poor parental practices and poor, unstable relationships with the parent-child relationships. So because of these risk factors, I think, which is why we at Boys Town, I think we want to look at really bridging that parental gap to support parents in their journey in parenting their children. Like I mentioned earlier, I think there are parents out there who are not very attuned to observing distress, signs of distress in their children, especially their teenage children. Because again, sorry, I want to quote this study from Youth Epidemiology and Resilience Study. They have found that actually parents are really not attuned to their adolescent children. They are not able to identify signs of distress in them. So based on the findings of the study, which is why we want to look at how we can help parents parent more positively. We want to help parents to be able to establish, nurturing, positive and stable relationships with their children, because this will act as a buffer, for their children's mental health.
Can you give us some examples of what are signs of distress for parents in the room? What does it look like?
Usually when for both children and youth, especially when you see a drastic change in their moods, they self-isolate, they start withdrawing themselves, or they show less interest in activities that used to be interested in. There is a change in their appetite or their sleep pattern. So I think if these are things that parents can look out for. So it's really paying very close attention, observing their children. Like earlier, I think a lot of us have shared that children yearn for their attention. Like there's no time spent with them because in our society, I think we live in a very fast-paced society. And it's always morning, wake up, send the kids to school, parents go to work, and then after work, pick the kids, come back home, we have our dinner, you do your homework, you do your revision, and then we go and rest. So this happens every day, 5 days a week, minus school holidays or whatsoever. So that leaves actually parents with very little time to connect with their children. So I'm just wondering, really, I think we can think to ourselves, how often do we actually really sit down with our children at the end of the night, or to really connect with them, to talk to them. Yeah. So therefore, like what I mentioned, these are some of the things that we should look out for. I think having that time set aside, like protected time to connect with our children, can help us to be able to find out more about them, what they are experiencing. Is there any challenges they are going through?
I understand. Daniel, would you like to?
Okay, I'm just going to add on a little. Partly, I think more from the parents' point of view, because I can almost hear the parents going, I asked them. They said, fine. Nothing. How are you? Okay. And then they don't want to talk to me. I asked them. It's not that I don't. And many times, that's after we pick up something's wrong. The cry for help, the screaming for help has started already, and we notice. And with trauma-informed care, you must understand that they probably don't feel so safe with us. And we need to persevere. We need to really sit down with them. We need to convince them that I'm really here. I'm really, really here. I'm not going to run away. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to scold you, blame you. And I'm here. And I just want to hear your pain. And that's what youth, when they are distressed, and I think we can all identify with it. When we are distressed, it's the pain that's inside that we might not have the words, and we need time for someone to sit down with us to just listen to the pain in our hearts before we can sort of unpack it. Our children may be struggling to feel safe with us. We need to persevere and trust that they want to be connected with us. I don't think I've come across a child who, if there was no history of abuse or anything like that, who said, I don't want to connect with my parents. Actually, to children, the parents are their heroes. That's who they are, and they want to do what is right, like I said earlier.
I guess if I were to add on to what Daniel was saying, right, I think, again, I discussed this question, right, with the team I have back at work. And I think one of the things we're actually really thinking about is, what does it mean to flourish, right? Is flourishing always being perfect, always doing things well, always going through very pleasant and very smooth things? Actually, one of the things that we really did talk about, I guess, to build into Daniel's point, right, about, if we as adults in a child's life, or if we as parents, or even we as young people supporting our friends, right? And we know Daniel talked about, some parents say, yeah, I asked, but then they don't want to say, right? So I guess if you think about flourishing, right, actually it's not about going through all the nice rosy things, but it's really about how this person can accept failure, adversity, and all that gracefully, right? That is what it means to rebound. That is what emotional resilience is, right? So I guess as influential people in the lives of our youth, how can we show the youths that we will gracefully accept whatever that they come with? Because if you think about children or youth who don't tell their parents things, somehow they have learned that so-and-so will not gracefully accept what I'm going to say, right? So I guess building on Celynn's point and Daniel's point, right? Don't wait until the trauma has happened, then you ask. It needs to be done right at the start to show that I am going to gracefully accept whatever you bring to the table. I may not agree with you, I may not condone this, but I will listen, right? So when my team and I thought about, what can we do to help our young people flourish, is really to show them that we can gracefully accept whatever they bring to the table, so that down the road, when they adult, then they can learn that I can gracefully accept whatever that I come with, right? And then that's to us what it means to flourish, right? Because when they can do that, then adversity, stresses, things that go wrong won't seem like the end of the world to them. They can see that, hey, it has gone wrong, and I can do something about it. It has gone wrong, and it doesn't define the whole of who I am or the whole of my life, right? So I guess one of the things that I really thought very hard about when I thought about this question is the definition of flourish, right? Because I guess in mainstream media, right, we think about flourishing as going to a good school, getting a good job, getting a good pay, getting a degree. Is that the sort of flourish we want our young people to have, right? Yeah, so those are my reflections.
I think there are many themes in there. One is around how do we destigmatize, right? And I wonder if any of the panelists would like to speak to this. How do we avoid, not taking our youth too seriously, right, until it's too late? And I think another thing that was mentioned earlier is you cannot give what you don't have. But it's almost like if many of us or some of us are walking around with somewhat severe trauma, then what are we doing to address our own traumas? Because if we want to break the cycle for the next generation, then we need to work on ourselves, right? So, just curious for the panelists, how do we destigmatize? How do we work on ourselves? Do we have these conversations about our trauma at some point with our children?
Maybe I recall my own personal experience with my boy. I remember it was primary 1, and he wanted to join the school soccer team. Guess what? He was rejected. Then he wanted to join the golf. Then guess what? He was rejected. Then in primary 2, they came for audition, right, for Wusu. And guess what? He was rejected. It was traumatic. He came home crying. Because I remember back then, CCA was something fun. You join what you want. But the school was different. At P1, they start selecting you so that you can join the school team and play in the inter-school competition. And in fact, in primary 3, thank God he got into Wusu, and your school team. And subsequently, in P5, P6, he got onto the nationals team. Then trauma started again, because training was 4 days a week. His friends were enjoying the after school. He was cursing and swearing. And guess what? After that, he went to secondary school. He said, no more Wusu, right? And in secondary school, he could go through DSA. It was phobia. He didn't want DSA to Wusu, right? And then he started take karate. Thank God he was selected. But throughout this whole period, what we realized is to get my kid to actually open up to say more than just okay. You know, during his growing up years, basically everything was okay. So we started to spend more time with him, and my wife and I made it a point to focus on just, I actually recorded down so I can remember, the 4 A's or 3 A's, my wife likes this. Number 1 is to be aware. So what we do is that we make a time we try as much as we can to have dinner with my boy and to be mindful. So the first A is really being aware. And we actually being mindful of our thoughts, our feelings, and our physical sensations. Because back then in school, he used to come home to tell us he got stomach ache. We bring him to see all the doctors. The doctor said it's stress. He said it's nothing to do with the stomach. We spend a lot of money. All right? Yeah, I shouldn't be saying this behind my boy's back, but anyway. And we started to look into things like journaling, asking him to share more, and to take a moment to check in with him. So for us, as a family, we started awareness. And I also share with him my stresses at work, my stresses, back then I took a part-time study as well. So I share with him, you know, my fears of not being able to complete my assignment on time a few years ago. Yeah, and he was more aware of it. And what we did subsequently is to acknowledge. So we told him that we are aware of it, you have to acknowledge. And acknowledging means sharing about the feelings. I'm worried because of what? And he tends to share now. And when he shares, we just listen, you know, because sometimes parents, we say, alamak, this kind of thing. Yeah, behind our head, sometimes we think of that, but we keep quiet, okay? So as parents. So when he is able to share and acknowledge the issue, we just listen. And subsequently, what we do is we guide him through the process of accepting it. Because you can't get to Wushu, you can't get to whatever, that's it what you can do. Cry, that doesn't solve the issue, right? Even as adults also, accept it Nothing much you can do, right? Yeah. And being acceptance means that it's okay not to be okay, and it's okay to actually fail. And we walk him through the process of the awareness, the acknowledgement, acceptance. And subsequently, we tell him, you have to take action. What's next? Then we move on. And quite interestingly, my son chose the what's next is sharing the same room as the parents, as a form of distress. You know? Yeah, or having his Japanese food, you know, something like that. Well, but it worked for us because it sort of manages his emotional needs. And that also allows us as parents to also be aware of him, acknowledge him, accept, and ultimately take action together as a family. It's not scientifically proven, but it works for my family. Yeah. So I thought I'd just share that on how we cope. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it ties it very well to what you were saying, Denise, right? It's new definitions of flourish. And sometimes to flourish can be so simple. It's not the big things, but it's the small things in our daily life. Yeah, it's a new reframing. I'd like to just focus a little bit on the panelists themselves. It's very encouraging and inspiring to see that this is actually happening in our church. The work that all our panelists are doing, it's happening in our church. And the question I had for them is, how do you keep hopeful? And what are your spiritual disciplines like in the context of Ora et Labora, work and pray? So any panelist?
Maybe I can share first. I don't know if you're aware, but Clarity, our patron saint, is this lady called Saint Divna. And we recently celebrated her feast day earlier this week, right? And I guess this idea of hope, I think it's quite timely because we had a mass in commemoration of the feast day and everything. I think during the homily, Father talked a little bit about depending, how sometimes this work is actually quite difficult, right? There are days where we go home and I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I go home and it's just like, don't talk to me, I'm done talking to people already. I have enough of my social quota for today, right? And it's really quite tiring sometimes, right? And I think Father acknowledged that in his homily, right? And he reminded me of something that I have, I guess, put at the back of my head for a period of time, which is, remember, first of all, I guess, the people's lives that we are impacting, right? I think sometimes because of what our young people go through, the expectation is that they must do well, right? And sometimes when they achieve seemingly really small things, but to them it's a huge accomplishment, right? So imagine a young person who is depressed, right? Having difficulty even getting out of bed. Sometimes even going to brush his teeth, very good already, right? And I guess when I remember that those little things that happen, right? And to remember that, hey, I was a part of this journey with him, actually that keeps me hopeful. It also keeps me hopeful when my colleagues, sometimes they share with me as well, that they share a few things. Either I feel you, I understand what you're going through. It helps me to feel like, wow, I'm actually a normal person. I'm not a terrible therapist for feeling sick of this work that I do, right? And I guess when they share about their success stories as well, right? And so I think sometimes what gives me hope also is what my clients tell me. I think every now and then, when I've genuinely felt really, really proud of whatever that my clients go through, right? And I tell them that, at the end of this, we've journeyed together for 6-7 months, do you remember what you were like at the start, right? Where are you now, right? And then we'll talk about that, and then I tell them that, I'm actually really, really proud of all the effort and the courage that you've put into this. And then they tell me things like, Denise, you're the first person in my life to tell me that you are proud of me, right? So things like that keep me going when things are quite hard. Yeah, so I thought I'll share first because I think I still remember we only celebrated the Feast Day Mass earlier this week, so it's really fresh in my head. Yeah.
I want to quote, and I think among here I have a Canossian sister sitting among us. As I would love that she definitely would know this. So for Canossian sisters, I have one that works really closely with me, Sister Teresa, and one of those mantras that she goes about with is, those who love are never tired, since love knows no burden. And that's a quote from St. Magdalene of Canossa herself, meaning that if you think about it, yes, there will be physical fatigue from doing the work, but we are in a privileged position to be helping these families. And we talk about igniting our own hope. Then we have to ask ourselves, sometimes we may be the only hope that the families have. You realize that some of them get circled around different schools. MOE bounce them around like a ball, or MSM bounce them around like a pinball, waiting for enrollment, waiting for a shelter, waiting for somewhere to go. And eventually when they come, set foot into your center and you tell them yes, and you see the face move from, I'm worried, to, I finally found a place for my child. I finally found a place for my family. And so then again, those fuels us. Yes, the going gets tough, but on a day-to-day basis, if we don't keep going back to the reason why we're doing this, then you're going to get really tired. But with the why, then that's where you look around your colleagues, you bump each other and then say, tiring, right? And then you're like, yeah, all of us like, yeah, but we're all still here together. And we journey and we battle together. And we form that band of hope for our families. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I agree with Denise that the work is very hard, it's tough, it can be very trying. So what I always tell, myself as well as for the parents, the children, the youth that I work with is that in order to continue to have hope, I think it's important to measure your progress using a micrometer rather than a yardstick. Because if you want to try to measure your progress using a yardstick, your hope is just going to diminish. Yeah. So in order to continue to have hope, I think we need to go easy on ourselves. I think we need to celebrate every small little achievements or successes that we make.
Yeah, for me, I personally do not know what is not tiring, because school is tiring, work is tiring, managing relationships is tiring, But having said that, I start off the session by also knowing that abandonment and hope may be an oxymoron, but basically abandonment is really at the lowest point in life. But there's still hope. And what really keeps us going in the IJ is really not the physical gate of hope at Chimes today, but the gate of hope that each of us hold, or that I hold today, that I bring. And really, that's what keeps me going. And I'm really praise God for the IJ sisters for being 170 years in Singapore and 400 years worldwide. And really, really, their spirit, their mission keeps all of us going to be that gate of hope. And it's not just a physical place, but all of us can be that gates of hope. Because I really believe there's nothing that's not tiring lah. Serious. Yeah. From birth also tiring, right? Drinking milk sometimes can be tiring, I thought. Okay, I hate milk. Yeah, sorry.
Just reflecting, because this is my 27th year in social services and listening to various and helping various people through their difficulties. And many times I have felt tired. Many times I have felt weary. And one of the reflections that always comes back to me is actually from Matthew 11, verse 28 to 30. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. And it's the first three words that especially strike me. Come to me. And I think that's whenever I feel bone weary, when I start losing hope, that's when I've gone away from Him. And the moment I come to Him again, I find hope. And if you ask me if it's on my own strength, I think I would have quit after the first year. But it's really God's grace that sustains. Yeah.
Amen, amen. And, this conference, Care for Creation, and in Pope Francis's recent apostolic exhortation, Laudate Deum, means praise God for all His creatures. So, yeah, I think God is delighting in each and every one of us. And at this juncture, what I'd like to do is open up questions to the floor. Whether any of you may have any questions for our speakers. There are mics right here, and we can pass one around as well. Any curious questions? Yes, please.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
I was listening to all of this. I can resonate because I've got 3 kids. Thank God, actually one just left, so I can speak openly. But they're all very old. So the youngest is 20, the eldest is 30. We went through a very tough time with the 2 girls. The boy was a lot easier to deal with, but we went through a tough time because he was easy to deal with. So then, as you guys were talking about it kind of struck me and said, we are dealing with, as I did, with the after effects of them being, going through trauma or having a difficult time. So the question I have for myself, and even maybe you guys may shed some insight, is how do we get kids from, at what age and how do we do this, that they have that strength and resilience and fortitude? Because we're dealing with, in today's society, the fallout. The question is, if you go back, we were just kidding, you said, in the younger days, you got nothing to do, go kick the soccer, go back, father will whack you go to sleep. It's like, we still survived, we all still made it, right? So, in today's society in Singapore, I think we've got it so good that it's become quite difficult and challenging for the kids. So what can we do better with, let's say, younger kids to build that resilience in them?
For me personally, I feel that family time is important. And that was a commitment that my wife and I made when my child was born. Now he's 17. We thought it was easier. Trust me, it's also more difficult. JC1. and how I look at it is that actually I think studies have shown as well from the child team from NUS, the first 10 years is actually very, very critical. And trust me, if you look around today, at every eatery, when it's a family dinner time, the easiest way to settle a kid is through a mobile device. True or false? But that impacts family life. That impacts the conversation. In fact, that while waiting for the food, it's the best time for us to talk about what happened in the day. But sadly, we don't do that. Right? And even making a commitment to have dinner together. I know back then I was young, okay, my parents were a bit stricter. That means after school, come back home, and you really need to have a family dinner. But today, trust me, the young have all excuses not to have dinner at home. Right? Then it's really about our family values of having the importance of eating together. But of course, eating together also must be interesting. Cannot eat together and you watch your phone, I watch my phone, or we eat together in front of watching the TV. It doesn't make sense. So a lot has to deal with the commitment of the family. Yeah. So my wife I'm normally the slacker. My wife will be the one who really pull me back. Yeah, because there are just so many disturbances. I mean, even as parents, we all know work sometimes brings us late into the night. After that, we have events. Saturday, we also have events. So, sometimes you're just being torn apart. That's the reason why, actually, this evening, we made a commitment to have a dinner together, even with my mom and my brother, the whole family coming together. But we have to make that commitment. If we don't make a commitment, nothing happens. That's what I think.
I guess to add on as well, right? I think one of the questions you asked was how can we help our children to be resilient, right? How can we help our children to deal with the challenges that they go through, right? Regardless of whether they are a young child, like what you guys deal with, or an older child like yourself, right? 20s, 30s, right? And I think to me, the first step is always not to discount their challenges. I think one of some things that you say also remind me of what my dad told me as well when I was younger. Like that only And then why you so upset, right? And I guess one of the things, now that I'm a therapist, right? I think one of the things that I think is really, really important is not to discount the challenges that they go through. Because again, it's one of those, again, I went back to my team, right? And we talked about whatever that we're going to talk about today. And one of the things that we did talk about is, the children may not have gone through what we have gone through when we were younger, right? Children these days, being caned until jialat is not as common. Children these days, it's not as common that they go to school hungry, right? But they go through different challenges. Like, I think one of the things that my team and I talked about back at our workplace was, back then, when I was younger, when social media wasn't a thing, if I were to be bullied in school, I just leave the school and go home lah. The bullying stops. But now, I leave the school, I go home, the bullying here, right? So it may not have been what you have been through. It's different. But different doesn't make it any less painful, different doesn't make it any less, I guess, impactful. So we would think about, wanting to help our kids to be resilient, right? I think we would talk a lot of talk about family support, about parenting, about the relationship that you have with your kids. And I guess for you young people out there that are not parents yet, if you want to think about supporting your friend as well, right? It's about first of all, not discounting, right? Because if you discount, then that relationship won't happen. And if that relationship doesn't happen, then how can you be a support squad to the people that you care about? Yeah, so those were some things that my team and I did talk about back in the office. Yeah.
Gentleman first. Yeah, maybe him first and then.
So all the Indians will finish up. Maybe just. But we married Chinese wives. Okay, I just wanted to. So I've got two teens, right? One of the things I kind of struggle with is, I think when we're growing up, right, for kids, parents are a source of information. There's a lot of knowledge, experience, right? So they look. I look at my dad better, right? He knew everything. Whereas nowadays we live in a very different world, right? We live in a world where sometimes kids know much more than teachers.
right? You don't need to go to school to learn because then information is just antiquated by the minute, right? And so I think as a parent, the question is where's the fine line between them having an issue and being able to find their own answers through Reddit forums and this and that and whatever. There's like unbelievable amount of information. Of course, what's right, what's wrong, what's accurate, inaccurate. I mean, there's all of those debates. But really, from the clients that you see, especially with kids who come in with troubles, right? When they try to almost self-medicate themselves with information out there, is it actually helpful? Or is it always detrimental? And I'm guessing it's somewhere in between, right? And how do you balance that against advice that you would give them? Because maybe the advice you're giving them is not the kind of child psychology stuff that they would have researched themselves, right? Maybe that advice would be much better. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Because we're so digitally connected these days, right? I think even for parents themselves, if you have any doubts or questions, you will just whip up your electronic devices and find your answers to them. I think the way every family is different. But one of the ways, I have had this question where parents ask me this similar question before. So I think one of the ways to do it would be to very simply have conversations with them. I think switch roles with them whereby you want to learn from them. Put yourself in a position whereby I want to learn from you. Like, what are you reading? What sort of information you're consuming? Because nowadays they are on social media, the type of content that they're consuming sometimes can be very concerning. So we also want them to share with us what sort of content they are consuming. So we want to learn from them, be interested in what they have been reading, be interested in what they have been up to. So it can be a good thing, but it's a double-edged sword, I would say. It can be a good thing. It can also be a bad thing. So to help adolescent children navigate through all this content that they are consuming online, your best bet would be really to have continued conversations with them, so you know what they have been reading about, what do they know, and then you can chip in what are your thoughts about them. Yeah, there is, I would like to say there's no silver bullet solution to this, but really to really connect yourself with them and to have conversations with them about it. And if they do share information to you that is really concerning, I think it's important also to keep calm and to just let them know that, no, this is not appropriate. Yeah. Because sometimes when parents react, I know sometimes the kind of stuff that they read, when they share with us, it can be very alarming. We tend to react. The moment we react, they may withdraw because they know that, I'm not supposed to tell my parents. Because if I tell this to them, they are going to react. I don't know how to deal with their reaction, so I will keep to myself. I will not share with them about this. So managing ourselves, as parents, managing ourselves is also very important when you communicate with them, because you want that flow of communication, to keep it going. Yeah.
Just adding to Celynn's point is, how safe are we to them? How safe do they feel with us? If our first reaction is going to be, nah lah, that one all nonsense, and we discount it, then they're not going to feel like they want to share with us. And sometimes it might not be their own problem. It could be a friend who is going through a deep issue, has shared with them, and now they are like therapists but don't know what to do, and they are troubled and they are trying to look up stuff, and they may come to us with, I read about this, and our first reaction, if we just discount them, they might not come back to us even when they face their own issues.
Maybe I just add on, totally agree. In fact, my own mistake was, as a parent, I think I know everything, or I think I'm the best when it comes to my kids. I realized it because actually what he really needs is that sparring partner. What he really needs is that person to talk to, not so much of telling him what to do. And I guess a lot of times as parents, I make that mistake as well, that I always think my advice is the best. So likewise, whichever JC he wants to go to, decides whatever route, we walk through with him. We allow him to make the decision, although it causes a lot of stress. Yeah, because he accepted the poly and then took JC, kids these days, yeah. So again, But he made that decision, and we respect his decision, and we believe he made the best choice, and we support him along the way. I guess that's what I learned in that process.
Yes. Hi, I'm Janet from Canossaville. Just now the panel was sharing about letting children, ask them for their opinions. So I think that is really awesome because you help build their confidence and their self-esteem. But then I was also wondering, should you as a parent of a younger child also tell them the consequences of each alternative, or you let them find out for their own, the hard way, like what our parents do?
I think it is important for us to set boundaries for our children, especially younger children. We need to keep them safe, right? And I don't know whether it's a new thing, but what I see more often nowadays are parents who don't know how to say no to their children. That they have grown up in a space where, maybe we've been denied things by our parents. This one cannot, that one cannot, no. And then we grow up, we feel like we need to overcompensate. We don't want our children to go through all the things I have missed. And so we go like, okay lah, can lah. This one, okay lah, can lah. But after a while, they don't know how to take rejection or no, or to understand what no means. And that can swing the pendulum the other way and make things that they don't quite know how to say no for themselves even.
I think to add on to that as well, right? Like, should we let our young people, be it children or even our younger adults, right? Like, should we let them fall and realize it hurts, right? So I think one of the other things also to consider is what is your own values around that as a parent? What is your own distress tolerance like, right? I mean, if you think about let's think about even younger children, right? Like children learning how to walk, right? At some point, you're going to have to let them walk and fall down, right? And I guess as parents of someone so tiny, you know that it hurts, you know that they're going to cry, but you're going to let them do it anyway, right? Because if you don't let them do that, then the cost of that is that they will never learn to walk, right? The cost of not letting them fall is that they will anyhow climb to all sorts of high and dangerous places, and then they will not have a concept of danger, right? So I guess there's no straightforward answer to that question, but it's also a question of, I guess, for parents, for a young person at this stage of his or her life, right? What sort of mistakes can we embrace? What sort of risks or failures can we embrace, right? So for example, right, like yourself, right, you were sharing about how your son was choosing a JC and after that went up to poly, and I think it wasn't smooth, but he has learned lessons from that, right? And I guess that was what you and your wife could embrace, right? That was what you guys thought was a good lesson at this stage of his life, right? So, in that question of should we let them fall, should we, tell them the consequences, it really depends on how old, for what, what are how heavy is it if it does, right? Yeah, so that's just my thoughts.
I want to address that question since I was the one who said about making children the decision maker, right? I want to add on to that part where we say, technically speaking, I think in this room of leaders and workers, constantly you're making decisions. But when you make the decisions, you also ask yourself the who, what, where, when, how, the data. And if you have someone who is so driven and say, I need an Excel file before I could make the decision. You put me through a 26 slides PTT before I can make a decision. And even for parents, when they say, oh, where should my child be placed after early intervention, after preschool? The only thing that we've been all doing is giving information and data so that they can make an informed decision. So all we needed was to say, sure, if you're very interested in the topic. So for example, there was this conversation that my social worker was having with the child, the child was asking the social worker about tattoos. Oh, you swing. Which way you're gonna have that conversation? I hope I correct. You tell the child no out of the question. Daddy doesn't have, or we don't have. So you're not gonna have it, right? But then what if they say, but this is an expression of art, right? I want to express myself, or I wanted to put something more religious, and you feel, oh no, are you rejecting those things now, right? And so this becomes blurred. But then what you do then is give the both sides of the coin, right? Give the child information and data that the child may not have knew. So question of smoking, they also ask questions like that. I see that in movies, I see that in shows, I see that in videos that I see on YouTube. Then my social worker had an answer that was creative, but I thought that was helpful to help the child understand. We're not saying that smoking is bad for health. Smoking is not bad. Smoking is bad for health, right? But then they will still have thousands of answers and questions about it and say, but why don't you tell schools say no to smoking? You can't do this, you can't do that. Then we're saying that now here is, we're making you understand this is something that we don't want you to embark into for your health, for your reasons and all these things. So you're surrounding the child with all these answers, but at the end of the day, will the child still want to attempt it? It's something that is then, again, discernment, right? We have to then give them that enough values-driven education that we're all doing here, and that even therapy at times to even help this child get there. So decision making, great. We can have them the fair share of that, but again, not having them go too far away from what we can accept. That's like I said, boundaries and things. So yeah, right. Thanks.
Thank you. Wow, I'm learning a lot also for how I can put into practice boundaries, saying no. Yes.
Hi, Ethan here. Thank you so much for your sharing. So a little bit of context on this question is that I've been working with at-risk children for about 7 or 8 years now. For the last 4 to 5 years, I've been teaching them music, and that has been really such a fruitful experience for myself. And talk about decision making, a lot of talk about how to discern what is best for them. And something I came to realize was that there's so many opportunities out there in the digital age, how to leverage AI, to do simple things like coding. So my question really is that, knowing, especially at-risk children, or even for the rest of parents over here with kids, what is the best way to help kids identify opportunities that are good for them and to empower them to take these up, knowing that there's so much fear, so much apprehension that can come with that, knowing that they could burn out from even making these decisions, but helping them realize by themselves what they're gifted in and how they can best contribute and discern how to be an adult in a very healthy way. Thank you.
Let me just share a bit on this part. I'm working on a separate piece with MSF. It's really about music, sports, arts, to build resilience in child development. And every child is unique. Every child is different. Likewise, for IG as well, we say that the child is the focus of our organization. All of us are different. So you can use music, you can use sports, you can use arts. Even I think like mental wellness. I mean, I've been involved in some of the external work through MSF as well, mental wellness and the SG Mental Wellness Network. We also recognize the fact is that everyone has a different style. So some may express it through art, some may express it through journaling, some may need to talk, some will need to play. It's different. Yeah, so if you ask me, there's no one size fits all, and it's really about trial and error. Yeah, if you ask myself, seriously, I may not also know. Sometimes I like to write down, jot down. Sometimes I just want to talk to my wife. All of us are different. And perhaps at different phases of life as well, our approach may be different. Yeah, I mean, that's my thoughts. I know.
I think if I were to share in my conversations with young people, sometimes I think, earlier on we were talking a lot about this, I'm not good enough sort of belief, right? And a lot of times in my conversations with young people, that is actually what stops them from trying things. So, in this day and age, they are great at Google, they know what is out there, right? But do I want to do it? Do I want to commit to doing it? So I think with a lot of young people that have this difficulty, what I do find as a theme is that the idea of committing is actually quite scary for these young people. If I commit to this at this stage in my life, does that mean I am destined to do this for the rest of my life? What if I don't like it? What if I fail? What if I'm not good at it? Right? So I think a lot of times I guess a comfortable middle ground that I work out with these young people is, you know what? Just try. No one asking you to commit now. Right? But if you're asking me, how will I know if I'm good enough? The only way is to try lor. Right? So I guess for our young people, developmentally speaking, right, it's a period of trying new things, a period of experimenting, right? Otherwise, how will they know who they are, right? So that's what I tell the young people is, you know what, try, right? No need to commit, sometimes it helps if you break it down into smaller steps, right? Like this opportunity that looks kind of nice, no need to enroll in a diploma if that's not what you're prepared to, Do you want to try some online courses? Do you want to try some free Google tutorial or free YouTube tutorial? Try lah, then we see where that goes, right? So that's how I usually reach a middle ground with these young people, yeah.
Adding on just to Denise's point, same point, please do continue to try, but what you as the instructor do is give them the safe space and environment to try. Because you're the one in control of their actions too. That's really, really it.
And the word try means that you will make mistakes, right? And I think the question is, are we ready for them to make mistakes? And to reassure them that they make mistakes, they are not a mistake. I think that's very important because I see adults in the therapy space who, when they were children, had experience and they had made mistakes, and they continue to carry with them this feeling that I am a mistake. And I think that's what can scar.
Yes.
Here for the discussion. My question is related to the topic of LGBTQ. Now, especially in the social backdrop, so identity is often linked to sexual orientation and gender. So in your experience working with young people, has that topic come about, and how do you talk to them in terms of, you have a very beautiful faith and it's very beautiful teaching, but how do you validate how they feel as Denise in your faith, and not sort of try to go about it in a very apologetic way, and yet also preserving the truth and trying to teach them what is right in the world. And of course, how courage exists, we also don't want to jingle them, and we also want to respect the fact that when they come to you in a place of emotional trust. How do we cultivate the emotional trust in terms of their identities and how they perceive their identity in the context of the church and with Catholics? Thank you.
We may need to huddle for 2 minutes before we answer. We may need to book a small room at the side just to talk about this.
Okay, I'm going to try, all right?
Family life.
Make mistakes, all right. Yeah. I'm in a safe space, right? Yeah. I think one of the most important things is first for us to be formed. We need to know what the church teaches, right? We need to be comfortable with it. And then when they approach us, we know what to tell them. And I think it's also understanding where your child is coming from when they approach you to talk about that topic. Is it something they are personally struggling with? That I think I'm attracted to males. As a guy, I have same-sex attraction, I think, right? Or are they coming to you as young adults and saying, it's been a period and I'm quite sure I'm gay, right? And what are they coming to you with? Again, the principle of safety, of first accepting them and reminding them. And I think the challenge, and I can just imagine, I've played this in my head before, okay? I've got 2 boys. And one of them, I've played it in my head, if one of them comes up to me one day and goes like, Dad, I've got something to tell you. I'm gay, you know. How would I take it? Can I remain calm? Can I go, all right, come sit down? Right? And be able to tell him still, I love you as my son, that doesn't change. Now tell me a bit more about what's behind that, right? Is it a struggle? Is it a pain? Is it a decision? And I think we need to be able to, again, as Jesus, and I think even Pope Francis would say, you know, it's how do we accept them and love them first. The rest of it, we may need to take some time to figure out together, right? But are we ready to accompany them on this journey, to be companions with them?
I think how I usually approach someone who has, I guess, shared that with me is to remember that this is a person first and foremost. Whatever gender identity, whatever sexual identity, or whatever other identity that has nothing to do with gender or sex comes up, you are first and foremost a person, right? And that is how I will treat you, like anybody else that walks into my therapy room, right? It just so happens that this specific issue that you're dealing with isn't the most common. But as a person, your emotions are no different from anybody else. You have the right to be angry, to be sad, to be frustrated, to be disappointed, just like anybody else. How I treat a sad person with, I guess, a non-traditional gender role is no different from how I treat a sad person who does subscribe to a traditional gender role, right? So I think that's first and foremost, right? And what I usually find really, really helpful, I don't know, is I tell them that I bring the psychology into this conversation or into this therapy. You bring the gender things because, you know, you may identify as fill in the blank, whatever it is that you identify with, right? And that journey is yours lah. I can read all the books I want, attend all the talks I want, but none of that is fully representative of whatever it is that you're going through, right? So I always tell them, let's meet in the middle. You bring your journey, I bring the psychology, and we work it out as best as we can. We may or may not have the answers. You may or may not be ready to do whatever that research prescribes, right? I mean, we have all this research about best practices, right? But I guess ultimately it's only research lah, right? It doesn't mean that our young people are ready to do it, right? So what is it that you need at this point, right? So I guess in my experience, talking to this crowd, it's really no different from other young people. How will my friends see me, right? Will I be a good enough partner to my partner? Will my parents accept this, or will they think it's wrong or it's a mistake? Right? So if you think about it, it's similar themes, right? It's just the topic changes, right? And that topic could be about LGBTQIA+, right? It could also be about other things like my job choice. What if I choose? I guess it's very stereotypical. What if I choose to be in a freelance artistic sort of job, right? The typical Singaporean parents, really Or at least my parents, I don't know about yours, but my parents say, really no stable income right? So I guess in different generations or in different eras, what we do find stigmatizing is different. In this era, that is a topic that has come up, right? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe just quickly, I always struggle with this as well. I mean, I have Catholic friends that are gay. I also have Catholic friends that are lesbian. And I was also learned from them that actually there are a lot of pronouns. Yeah, I'm still learning that as well. One thing I've learned in the process is there's no right or wrong sometimes because no point going to argument with them because it's our belief, their belief, what our perspective is and what their perspective is. But ultimately, the fact remains we are still friends and we are still a child of God. Right? And I think that is what keeps the conversation going. Because likewise, premarital sex, there's so many things we want to talk about in the church, right? But ultimately, their perspectives and our perspectives may not be fully aligned. But nothing changes the fact we are all child of God and we are all children of God. If we believe that, just continue praying lah. That's all I can say. Yeah.
Thank you. Would you join me in giving our speakers a round of applause? We're at the end of our time together, but just very quickly, if you can scan this QR code, we just want to collect the last question, question number 3. What are some of the key insights you have taken away from your time here? You can put NA for question 1 and question 2 so that we can see the collective learning and wisdom in this space. And as you do that, I'll just get the panelists to give a 1 or 2-liner takeaway for our time here together.
1 to 2 sentences. I think maybe just one word that has come up a lot today is attunement, right? Just being, I guess, as you guys have shared, aware of what's going on for our young people. Being attuned also means, not dismissing it just because it makes us uncomfortable, right? So just to be aware, to be attuned, and I guess to respond to that. Yeah.
I think the word for me is accompaniment. About accompanying our children, our youth, our young people in their journey in life, and being there for them and being a safe space for them.
For me, it's really not just about caring for the environment, but really also our social environment. Yeah, I think that's the key takeaway for me. Yeah.
I think it's important to care for ourselves and also to care for those around us.
My quote that I'm ending here with will be, the first step into solving a problem is to realize that you have one. So look around. If you know the problem, realize it and work on it.
Alrighty. I hope this was an insightful panel, and thank you all for being such a wonderful participant as well. Thank you.
So thank you, Audrey and the panel. I think it was a very rich sharing. So we can get a quick photo.